Здравейте, обожавани! Днес ни гостува Алиса. Алиса беше самотна в брака си и беше изпълнена с ярост към мъже, който я игнорираше. Когато той й обяви, че беше срещнал друга жена по време на престоя си по работа в друг град, тя беше съкрушена и още по-ядосана, разбираемо. Тогава тя направи нещо контраинтуитивно, което накара мъжът ти да зареже другата жена на момента и да се върне при нея. Тези дни Алиса се нарадва на вниманието и отдадеността на мъже. И днес тя ще ви разкаже цялата си история. Hello, Alisa. Hello, hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to Bulgaria.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tell us how is your marriage before you started using the skills.
Well, I mean, I was introduced to the skills 15 years into my marriage. So up until that moment, it had been evolving. And honestly, we started out on our honeymoon. We had fights and I stormed off and my husband didn't know where I was. And, the honeymoon's supposed to be where you're still so in love and there's no problems in the world. And so from the start, my husband always said, I don't think this is meant to be. But I grew up watching my parents fight and I knew that's how marriage was. That's how a real marriage was. People fight and they just find their way through it. So I didn't realize how bad it was. And until a year into our marriage, and he was talking to me, and I was just, like I said, on our honeymoon, I stormed off. I was having these fits of rage. And he said he was thinking about other women, and the marriage was really hard for him. And I just thought, you've only been married a year and you can't even handle this. But my wake-up call was after we had our first baby, and that was like a year and a half into our marriage. And he was holding our baby girl, and I got so angry. And before this point, I would yell and scream. I would storm off. I mean, I just knew that I had a temper, just like my dad did.
Yeah.
But that I don't know, maybe I was crazy, but I knew if he would just listen to what I had to say, I wouldn't get so upset. If he just understood where I was coming from, but he never did. He just argued back and forth. Well, one time we were arguing, I was really upset about something that had happened. And he was holding our baby girl, trying to calm her down. And I punched him in the arm. And the baby started crying. And I don't even know if I hit the baby or not. There wasn't a mark. So I give myself grace there. But that's the moment where I realized, okay, I need to do something in order to keep our family safe. So that actually started my journey in therapy. And so I was in therapy on and off for the years after that. And all this time, though, I would see progress, and my husband would still say, well, I just don't know if we could be together, and another year would pass and I would feel like I was doing so much better. And he'd say, well, I just don't know if I want to be with you. It was just very painful, but I kept feeling like if I could just get good enough, if I was just, like if I could just be good enough for him, then maybe one day he'll decide to stay. And so I know I hear your empathy, and you can recognize, and I can recognize looking back, I was just chasing my worth, and nobody wants to feel that way, that they're always trying to earn somebody's love. That's not the way to live in a marriage. Well, I was really proud of the work that I had done all those 14 years. And so this is now maybe a month or so before I was introduced to the skills. My husband was getting ready to come home from being overseas. We live in the United States. He was in the Middle East doing contract work for the government. He had been there for a year. At that point, we had 5 kids. So it was me at home alone with 5 kids. I thought I was doing so well, and we were excited, and I just remember while he was gone during that year, just before he left, our marriage took a turn for the better, and I would go to sleep just, like, dreaming what it would be like to have my husband in bed with me again, like, and I just we had these interactions over that year that he was gone, and he was starting to talk about our future. I just felt so hopeful.
Yeah.
And yeah, and around that time, it was 2020 when the big pandemic hit. So he flew home, but he had to quarantine in a hotel for a couple
Mhm.
of days. So he was in the same city, and I was so excited, getting ready, a little bit nervous, like this is where the real work begins, because now we're going to be living together and we're going to have to figure out what that looks like. But I was so excited to start, and then I reached out to him and I said, we were just texting, messaging, and I said, oh, by the way, I was thinking about scheduling family pictures. Would this day work? And he texted me back and he said, I have something to share with you, and it has to do with the future of our family.
Oh, oh
And
my
my
goodness.
heart just sank. And I wanted to ask him, like, what is it? What is it? But I knew because he said, let's meet in person. I knew that it wasn't something that he could tell me over the phone or through a text message. So I didn't even bother asking, like, but my mind went to all the different places. What is it? You know? And of course, that with our history in the past and him sharing, I've been thinking about other women, and there had been some emotional infidelity in the past, and that was just where my mind went.
Yeah.
And but I was trying to just stay open and stay neutral. It could be anything. But I definitely did a lot of prayer and a lot
Oh,
of like mental preparation. And so I met him at a hotel one night. And honestly, thank goodness for this quarantine, because that night I was devastated. Um, and I'm so grateful that we had that space where he was still there at the hotel and I came home. I'm glad that he didn't come home and then we had to go away one night and then come home together, and have everything fresh. So anyway, I went to the hotel and I wanted to just like run up to him and fall into his arms, but like my guard was a little up, and how do I act? How am I supposed to be? What's he going to tell me? And so I just walked up to him and I just remember that, like, this isn't how this reunion was supposed to be. We walked around the pool for a little bit. We finally sat down, and sure enough, my worst fear was true. He told me that he had been unfaithful to me while he was away.
no.
And yeah, yeah. And I was so proud of myself in that moment because I cried. The tears fell. And I just thought, will I ever be good enough to have the relationship that I want? Am I just not worthy of that kind of relationship? Am I just not capable of having that kind? And like, what is so wrong with me that this is coming up? And I was able to just kind of be in the moment and be very present and let my husband talk and explain. And even walking to the car, he's like, just hearing myself, I've been thinking about going to therapy myself, and that was something that I'd wanted for years. And just left it at that. Well, like I said, I'm so grateful for the space because he got another couple of nights in the hotel, and I was able to go home and be apart from him and just like let everything come down. So I think in the moment I was in shock, and I was just like trying to breathe through it, be present. But the very next day, Mila, oh, that woman of rage came back, and I was texting him all the nasty things, and I knew, like, looking back now, there was so much safety that first night. And then the next night it was just like, oh, this is same old Alisa. Like, this is
Mhm.
not going to be good. I could see it from his point of view. I texted him all those questions that I had, what happened? Or like, how could you do this? how could you not think of our kids? Where, I'm telling him, you can't come home until she's out of the picture. And he's telling me, well, what about the kids? And I was like, well, where was that thought then? It was just like all of those things that were completely justified. They were completely justified. But in my heart, I knew that's not who I wanted to be. And it was so ugly. And it was just like, but I didn't know what to do. Like, this was so painful. What do I do with all of this hurt and anger? And how do like, what's even the right choice to make? Do I let him back in our home? Do I let him back in my bed? Like, I'm so grateful. Yeah.
I hear
And that,
you. It
yeah,
sounds scary, Alisa. It sounds so scary that so I could just visualize you all excited, with all your hopes, having done your work like a good girl,
yeah,
15 years of
yes,
therapy, feeling like you're, on top of your game.
yeah,
Comes and he tells you that, and
yeah,
you, a mortal woman, I would probably go in a rage mode too. And I hear the conflict, like, I want him, but do I really want him? Do I want him back? But I do. He's the father of my kids. And what do I do? How do I act?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even during that year that he was away, I was really vulnerable with him. He had asked me for pictures. It was really outside of my comfort zone. I was like, no, once you throw those into the internet, anyone could get, anyway. It took me a while, but I overcame it. And we actually had this great like sexual connection while he was gone too. So I couldn't fathom it. What did I do wrong? But thank goodness that night, after I sent him all those nasty text messages and just unleashed my anger on him, a good friend of mine reached out. She knew that he was coming home. And she said, oh, Alyssa, how's it going? Her husband had worked away, so she was familiar with the transition that it can be to have your man come back when you've been doing everything alone. So she was just checking in on me. How's it going? She knew I was excited. All I said was, oh, Linda, it's not what I thought it would be. And like that, she called me. It was like 8 at night, 8 or 9 at night. The kids were in bed. I was on my back porch. I could like remember it so clearly. And she called me and talked to me for 2 hours on the phone. And she told me all about these skills and this podcast called The Empowered Wife and this book called The Empowered Wife. And she just gave it all to me. And we talked about self-care and we talked about gratitude. And by the end of the call, she had convinced me to do perpetual self-care, to take care of myself every moment. She had convinced me to go and write down a list of at least 25 reasons I was grateful for my husband. The more, the better. She's like, as many as you can think of, Alyssa, just write as many as you can think of. She convinced me to read the book or listen to it. I listened to it within a week after that call. And she also, the other key thing was she said, you need to give thoughts of this other woman zero oxygen. Because Mila, my husband wasn't begging to come back.
Yeah.
He wasn't even begging to come home. He said, I
So,
found someone else and she knows that I'm married and she knows that I'm going to come home to you and I'm going to see where this goes. I don't know what I want yet. And so I just had to give it zero oxygen. And that was the lifesaver. That was the life-saving advice. But what do you do when your thoughts go to the other woman?
there.
Because it's
Yes,
all the time. It's all the time.
yeah, I
Any
hear
little
you.
thing can trigger it. And so I really learned to ask myself, how do I feel? What do I want? Mila, I got sexy workout clothes. I got in the best shape of my life. I took hour-long runs around the lake listening to Laura's podcast. I had Laura constantly in my ear, whether it was the podcast or the book. So I learned the importance of self-care. And I listened to stories from other women who had experienced something similar. And I listened to what they did and I followed what they did. So that helped me, because it's tempting to say, the kids need this, or I don't deserve that, or we don't have money for that.
Yeah.
But at this point, it was like sink or swim. It's like, no, I need this. The kids need me. And in order for them to have me, I need to give myself what I need. And so I ate really good, even if that meant getting takeout, like a takeout salad, because I wasn't great at preparing those at the time. What else did I do? I listened to good music. I listened to sad music. I allowed myself to cry in my car or cry to a trusted friend. I went on a girls' trip to Lake Tahoe. We went to a cabin and spent a few days out there. It was just away from it all, just with my girlfriends. We connected and it was so great. I went paddleboarding on the lake for the first time. We had lived in this state for like 4 years, and we lived a mile away from this beautiful lake. And I had never been paddleboarding on it before. So I finally gave myself permission to go paddleboarding. And it was great. And I loved it. And I was like, why didn't I do this before? And you would think that this whole thing, everything that I've shared, would have sent me into despair and sent me into depression. And I had a history of depression. And I had a history of rage. And those things went completely away. As crazy as it sounds, I finally felt like myself for the first time since I had been married.
Amazing.
I've been married.
Yeah, amazing. So it sounds really counterintuitive. So I hear, instead of going on to him, watching, going like, you have to do this, because otherwise I'm going to get depressed and the kids are going to be alone and you're destroying our family. So what I hear is, which is the kind of the automatic thing that we all want to kind of do probably, I hear you do something very different, and that's to kind of first give zero oxygen to that other woman. And also to, it sounds like you're completely focused on yourself. Sounds like you got in a good shape, in the best shape of your life. You kind of, you started having fun.
I did.
As most probably to kind of sink in the misery and be like, my life. Which is also, a kind of a human thing to do.
And I had those moments where I had to cry and let it out, but I didn't do it in front. I realized that I didn't have to do it in front of him.
Yeah.
And I could share more about that later, but yeah, you had a question.
Share. What made you, what was that all? I didn't have to do it in front of him.
Yeah, because I shared that I was really vulnerable while he was gone, and sent him text messages, and we would text, and I would send him videos and pictures and all of that. And I loved it. We were like, I actually fell in love with it, as uncomfortable as it was in the beginning. I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually really fun and connecting. And I feel really feminine and sexy. Well, the thought came like, what was that all for? But my good friend on that 2-hour-long phone call, she said, and Alisa, let him back in bed. It's the healing that you need and that your relationship needs. And everything that she had said just resonated with me. So when she said that, I was like, okay, if you say it, it must be right. It must be, I'm willing to try it. And so I did. And our relationship was like, I realized that all of that was not for naught. Like, we had the best. And again, this was zero oxygen. And especially during that vulnerable time where you're physically intimate with your husband, that's when you're tempted to think, who's he thinking of? Or am I as cute as she? Zero oxygen. I stayed present. I said, my man's here now and we're doing this now. And like, we had our sex life was like the best that it had ever been. So not only was I the happiest I had been, in the best shape, I felt most like myself, but I felt really connected to my husband. And I realized all of those years of fighting, I just wanted to connect with him. That was the only way I knew to connect with him in the past. But thank goodness for these skills, I was able to find other ways to connect with him and ways that were really intimate and really emotionally safe. And so I knew I could see and hear the pain in his voice and in his heart of what he had done to me. And I knew that if I was just to like cry and express all my hurt to him, that would just be even more devastating. And I also understood that I didn't need him to validate what I was feeling. That was really big. And that's
Amazing.
something that you hear in relationship advice. You know, you sit down, one person shares one side and the other person validates that. And now I think about that and I think maybe that has a place if you can do that. It didn't work for us and it's just heavy. It just feels very heavy. I want my relationship with my husband to be light and fun and sexy and passionate. And it was. And I didn't want to. And so I took my pain to prayer. I took it to a good trusted friend. I took it to journaling. And I realized that if I just did that, like dedicated a little bit of time to that on a regular basis, then that was fine. That's all that I needed. Healing doesn't have to be so complicated. And it doesn't have to depend on somebody else's readiness either.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, so wise. Amazing. So you did something even more counterintuitive. You just let
Yeah.
him in. And you in your bed and you had physical intimacy with him. And I just loved how you mentioned this is the most vulnerable time and what you did. You didn't allow yourself to go and give that other woman oxygen. And so I see you, I can picture you, this in shape, happy,
Yeah.
just a joyful woman who is all sexy and
Mhm.
compared to what it would have been otherwise, probably,
Yeah.
miserable, depressed, and angry. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you chose for the former. And
Yeah.
and I just wonder what happened.
Yeah. How did the rest of the story unfold? I know, because I share first and foremost, the skill saved me. And now I can see how they saved my marriage too. I mean, it was just in the middle of it, during that time, it's just like, are they really working? Well, I know I'm happy, so I have to believe that they're working for something,
Yeah.
and I have to keep doing them for me because I love how I'm showing up with love. I love being so dignified and being able to tell my husband a few weeks later, I forgive you because I deserve that. And it was genuine. And I
Yeah.
love that. So anyway, a few months later, I didn't know this at the time because I gave it zero oxygen. I didn't ask questions. I didn't know, but
Wow.
it fizzled out. And that was I didn't even know that until I think we revisited it this year, 2 years later or 3 years later. um yeah, I guess it was 2 years after he had like finished, like just closed things off with her.
Yeah.
Um or maybe it was mutual. I don't even know the details of it, but it was like 5 months and it just fizzled out.
Oh,
It just fizzled out. It was a miracle now that I think about it, because I didn't even know for 2 years after it happened, like, is he still talking to her? I would still have those questions, but I would just give him zero oxygen. Yeah.
so you did the skills, you made yourself happy, you made
Mhm.
yourself available to him and all that for 2 years, and you didn't even know whether he was still,
I didn't.
amazing. What
I
a
didn't.
courage. And what
Yeah.
it seems like you had faith. Probably you felt along the way that things were getting better.
Yeah,
And
I did.
yeah,
I
yeah,
did. Yeah.
yeah. And so tell us about that.
Oh, like how I knew things were getting better. Yeah. Well, I mean, my just a month into the skills, my oldest daughter made a comment. She's like, "You and dad haven't fought for the whole time that he's been home." It had only been a month. So that shows how often we had been fighting in the past, but it also shows the significant change that had happened just a month into doing the skills,
Yeah.
that she would notice and she would comment. And I was starting to create the environment that I always wanted in my home. So that was a big aha moment, like, okay, I must be doing something right. And then, like I mentioned, our physical relationship was so much better than it had ever been before. My husband, he was still, talking to this during that time. He had still been talking to this other woman, but at the same time, he was planning these getaways for us in a hotel. Like he would plan this weekend getaway at this really nice hotel in town. And then for my birthday as well, he planned a really nice outing. And he was always taking me to these fancy hotels and getting us time alone. And it was just really exciting. I thought, can marriage really be like this? Can it be this fun? Is this too good to be true? Um, yeah, and he would make me breakfast. My husband's always been that way, but it was like it was almost like what he did wasn't good enough for me. Now that I think about it, he would give me gifts and want to do things for me, and I would think not that it wasn't good enough, but that I didn't deserve it. Like I didn't realize it at the time, but I would just kind of reject his gifts, and reject what he was doing and saying, no, that's too much, or no, that's what you want. That's not really what I want. And so finally, like with my self-care and being happy me, it was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. I was just open to everything. So finally he got to show up and be the man that he was all along, that he had suppressed because, I was constantly rejecting that side of him. And so it was yeah, he bought me really nice gifts for that Christmas and this pretty jewelry. I go out in these gorgeous clothes, like I'll show up to church. That's my day to dress up. And I typically get complimented when I'm wearing something that he's given me. So I tell everyone, oh yeah, my husband, he's my personal fashion consultant. I don't know. I'll tell women, oh, my husband got it for me. And they're so impressed because it's something so stylish and so elegant. And he just has great taste. So and there were no more, like, I'm not joking when I say there were no more arguments, which is crazy for me to think about, having lived through what I lived through, those first 14 years. All of a sudden the arguments are gone like that. There was a lot more listening. My husband started opening up to me and sharing things that I'd never thought that I would hear him say. I always thought, oh, my husband, he would never admit this, but this is, I'm sure, what he's feeling. But he'd never be that open with me or that in tune with himself to share it. But it's amazing when you stop talking, what your husband will fill in that space with. And like when I really started to hear him and listen to him and respect him, and it was like I got to fall in love with my husband all over again. And it was just, and he would apologize for things when I was hurt. Just like little, I don't know, that was big for me. I remember him apologizing like for something that he did and thinking, are you really doing this? Like I never heard my dad apologize growing up, and I hadn't really heard my husband apologize up until that time. It was always me apologizing for throwing something or hitting something, and suddenly the tables were turned. Like my rage was gone and there was this emotional safety between us. It was amazing. I
Yeah.
finally felt, I mean, you had mentioned this when we were talking before this we started here. Those words, cherished and adored. If you
Yeah.
listen to Laura's podcast, she says this is all about feeling cherished and adored. And I remember hearing those words being like, what in the world? I've never used those words in my vocabulary. Nonetheless, in context with a marriage, like that, is that even a thing? But all of a sudden, I would ask myself, how do I feel? And I felt cherished and I felt adored. Like it was a miracle. Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds like America. It sounds like this fairy tale relationship that you created, right? From
it
him,
really was.
yeah,
Yeah.
him going away almost for another
Hmm.
woman, And then suddenly you're becoming the best version of yourself, the happy, forgiving, open wife. And he steps in, starts taking you out on dates, luxury dates, giving you
Yeah.
gifts. And I hear the fighting was gone.
Oh my
Literally. It
gosh.
was
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah.
you fall in love with him again. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm sure, because I am sure that women would love to hear, women who are going through something like that at the moment would love to hear. So I would imagine that doubts popped up in that process, even though there was so much
Oh
evidence
yeah.
for you that he was committed and he was obviously there for you with all these
Yeah.
beautiful details you share. And I'm sure
Mhm.
that there were moments when you were doubting and you probably were tempted to open it up. And I just wonder, how did you, what were you doing when those moments came up?
Oh goodness. Well, I remember one time I was walking into the kitchen and I saw his phone there all by itself. And he was busy doing something. And honestly, it seemed like he always had his phone attached to him. So this was like my chance, Mila, to go into it and look and see. And I'll admit I'm not human. I did fall a couple of times, but for the most part, like it was pretty exceptional how I was able to give it zero oxygen, with the encouragement of, group coaching and my coach and the pot, all of that. So anyway, I was in the kitchen, I see his phone on the counter, and I have this commitment to zero oxygen in my head. And I'm walking towards it, and I almost reach out to grab it. And I ask myself, what is it that you're really wanting to know, Alyssa?
Yeah.
What is it that you really want to know? And I had to be honest with myself. And when I was, I realized I want to know that I'm good enough. I want to know that I'm worth it. And, the beauty of taking care of yourself, like I had heard about self-care, with all my years of therapy and personal development. And I was doing it. I took showers and did my makeup every now and then.
Took showers, long showers.
Yeah. That's really big when you have babies or kids knocking at the door. But at that point I was like really giving myself, I was finally putting my time and my money where my mouth was,
Yeah,
investing into myself. And what that does for you is when you have those moments and you ask, am I worthy? Am I enough? Then it's clear. It's so clear. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. And
yeah.
if he is having a weak moment and if he is needing to explore this, that's that's right where he needs to be. Maybe this is the best that he can do right now. And that's totally fine too. It has nothing to do with you.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, how
Yeah.
generous in a way, and how
Yeah.
wise to separate his actions from you. I just love it.
Well,
You, yeah,
oh, well, you use the word generous. When you're generous with yourself, it's easy to be generous with others.
yes, yeah. Yeah, so you were generous with yourself. You started kind of investing in yourself.
Yeah.
You started giving to yourself. And yeah, I can relate to that too. With that comes confidence because you do start feeling worth it. I started feeling much more worth it. Um,
Mhm.
and definitely, and it sounds like that was the way for you too. And I
Yeah.
love it that all you wanted to know was that you were worth that. That's why you were checking his phone. That's why you had all those
Yeah.
questions in your head. Is he still with
Yeah.
her? Is he talking to
Yeah.
her? Because you wanted to know that, you were worth
Yeah.
that. So if he wasn't talking to her, that meant you were worth it.
Mhm.
And of course, when we say it like that, it doesn't make sense. And I just love it that you realize that. Um, Oh, wow. So wise, so amazing, and just so inspiring. And it sounds like you had a few back steps. You, as you said, or your memorable
Yeah.
moments. There were some weak
Yeah.
moments when you brought it up. And I just love it that you still had these amazing relationships. So you didn't have to be
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, it happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Such a beautiful testimony of um, the fact that there's no perfection needed as long as it sounds like you stay committed to. I love it that you said my commitment to zero oxygen, to give zero oxygen to that woman, and I love it how you stopped yourself and like, oh, what do I really want here? What is that I'm trying to do?
Yes. Yes. That was my
Um,
habit. You know, it was
um,
like I had exercised that muscle.
yeah.
I still do. It's still a muscle. You know, it's like if you don't move your body every day, it's gonna you know, run out
Yeah,
of shape, or you're gonna get out of shape. And so it's the same thing. Like these skills are just a practice. And
yeah,
yeah, we've been through so much this past year. Almost 2 years now. We moved states. So I was uprooted from that beautiful lake and my wonderful community, and I was taken back to this place where it all started, which was connected to so many negative memories for me. It was so painful to come back. Even though life was good and my marriage was good, I would still have this emotion surface just from being here. So
mhm,
that was a transition. And then my husband, who had been working in different states, finally came home and started living with us full
amazing.
time.
Yeah,
And then I was living with my father-in-law. And then this year my husband lost his job. And then anyway, we've navigated so many different things since then. And it's been hard. And there were times that I didn't want to do the skills. And there were times, I was telling you earlier that I was like, I can't do this right now. But just staying with it, like I feel like I'm finally on the upswing of all of that. And I could see looking back, yeah, you know what? During this past year, I didn't do the skills as perfectly as when I first learned them. And sometimes I got down on myself for that. But even now, I feel like I'm in such a better place. And so, just to reiterate what you say, that even if you know better, or, if you can't do it perfectly, like we get points just for trying. I see
yeah,
women just try, and they create change in their
yeah,
marriages.
yeah. I
Yeah.
love it. We get points just for trying. I know my husband just
Yeah.
is grateful that I try, that I'm
Yeah.
committed. Even though I don't do it perfectly, that I'm committed to be respectful. And it sounds like you were that way. That's one thing I forgot to mention when I heard you saying not bringing up the woman, not asking questions about her. What an example of respect, Alisa.
Mm, thank you.
Absolutely amazing. When you're probably eating from the inside, and that's probably the thing you most want to know all the details about what they did and
Yeah.
didn't do, what they
Yeah.
said.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness. So I have just something quick to share about that. My brother gave me some really good advice about that. I was talking to him. I said, "How much do I ask? What do I need to know?" He said, "Remember, Alyssa, what you know, you're going to have to forgive."
oh, yeah, good advice indeed.
My list of questions went to this.
Yeah,
Like,
so
and
why?
Mila, what I needed to know to heal it all unfolded as it should, and I can look back and see, yeah, like I had this thing I would say that we call them spouse fulfilling prophecies. I'd say, "I trust you," and he'd
Yeah,
say, "How can you say that?" And I said, "Because you told me about this. Anything that I need to know, I know that you'll tell me."
yeah,
And he was very respectful to me too. When I said at one point, I said, I can't hear anymore. And he stopped. He tried, like he started to a couple times after that, but he stopped himself. So the respect that I gave, that came back to me as well.
yeah. Amazing. Amazing what you created, Lisa, in your relationship. And yeah, the power of SFPs, yes, it's definitely, I've experienced it in my marriage, and I love it that you gave that example how you use them to create more of what you want in your
Yeah.
relationship. Ah,
Yeah.
inspiring. And so, what would you like to kind of share with Bulgarian women? What would you like to tell them, or
Mm,
all Bulgarian women that might be in the same situation and feeling hopeless at the moment?
yeah. So 3 things, I guess. One is to experiment. Let it be an experiment. And I'll tell you, I had tried all the things when my friend came and told me about the skills. And so she would tell me, and I'm like, yeah, that's true, but I've already done this, you know. So when I committed to listening to Laura's book, I said, I'm going to finish it in a week and I'm going to buy myself a new dress. So just experiment and then reward yourself for experimenting. Reward yourself for showing up for you and for your marriage. You deserve that. That's the first one. Just let it be an experiment. And then number 2 is just to reiterate that fact. Remember, you get points for trying. When you feel like, oh, I didn't do that, or, you know, I'm not doing this and I should be, just let it go and just be like, this is my best and that's enough.
Mm.
And then the third, oh, what was the third? It was going to be so good. And now I can't think of it. Maybe that's all that you really need. Oh, no, I remember. Okay. So the third, self-care. What is that thing that you've been dying to do that you keep making excuses for? And my invitation is just do it. Like, just do it this week. Just do it. That one thing. You could do one thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Love that. Thank you. Thank you for your inspiring story, for so generously sharing it with Bulgarian women, and for this beautiful piece of advice that comes from your experience of transforming what it seemed to be a challenging, difficult relationship that almost ended. And I just have a lot of admiration for you, Alisa. So thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mila.
Now, let me see. I think we're good. I think
Okay.
yes, everything was good. Alisa, we were right. And thank you so much. That was amazing, so inspiring. I don't think I have heard your story probably a couple of times, but now having the chance to hear it on one-to-one was just really, really touching. It's a very powerful story that you have. I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you get to share it more and more, because you're going to inspire so many women, and you're going to give so much hope to women. Yeah, I just hope that you're sharing that as much as you can.
Thank you. Well, this is inspiring me to keep sharing my story. Thank you for the opportunity to share it.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
Oh.
I will send you something as a sort of a token of appreciation, a little one. Would you be willing to send me your address? I need your physical address.
Yes, thank you. How kind.
Yes, I'd love to do that. Thank you, Alisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. This is
I hope
great.
to see you soon. I'll see you definitely in the coaching calls, but
Okay.
I hope to see you soon.
Same.
Bye.
Bye.